Core Knowledge Part 3, the Listening and Learning Strand, an overview of materials and domains. Before we get started, it's extra important that you have access to those handouts. Please make sure you've opened Part 3, the Listening and Learning Strand. Inside, you'll see several different documents labeled both by their title and slide number. You'll need to access these throughout the section. Also, make sure that you have your notebook ready to take notes and to do some quick writing. Let's get started. Please press pause and quick write. Based on what we've learned so far, why is vocabulary and knowledge so essential to literacy development? Thank you. I'm sure many of you referenced the shifts in standards, the importance of building vocabulary and knowledge so that students don't fall into that achievement gap, and the importance of being able to access complex text as they grow into the later grades. All of these are vitally important. Our objective for this session is to become familiar with the domain structure and materials from the core knowledge listening and learning strands. As a reminder, the core knowledge curriculum is built in two strands: the skills strand, which develops those foundational skills needed to read, and the listening and learning strand, which build knowledge and vocabulary to help students access a wide variety of topics they may encounter later on. In the next few sessions, we'll talk about the listening and learning strand before transitioning to skills. The listening and learning strand is designed to strategically build student content knowledge on a range of topics over time. These topics expose students to broad content knowledge. They systematically grow students' vocabulary, and they develop students' listening comprehension of complex text. We don't expect students in K-1 to access complex text independently. So in this case, it's done through read aloud and listening comprehension. Please press pause and think or take a quick note. To what shift or shifts does this connect? If you said all three, you're exactly right. This attention of the listening and learning strand to expose students to complex text above their independent level specifically addresses shift 1, an attention to evidence and exposing students to a broad range of topics over time helps students engage with shift 2. And then shift 3 is really the heart of the listening and learning strand. This idea of building knowledge and academic vocabulary that will serve students on their path to college and career readiness. The listening and learning materials support K-2 students in building broad content knowledge and developing vocabulary. The domain topics were developed through research and consensus building among subject matter specialists, state departments of education, and professional organizations. The topics and the domains were also vetted by an advisory board on multiculturalism, teachers, scholars, and scientists. We mention this because we wanted to point out that a broad range of experts participated in the selection of these domain topics, which range from early civilizations, the human body, to the War of 1812. These topics were developed specifically to address the Matthew effect, that achievement gap as the knowledge gap that we studied in previous sessions. Building students' knowledge and vocabulary through access to complex text and a broad range of knowledge is the way to solve the gap between struggling students and on-level students. Core knowledge is currently used in more than 1,200 schools around the country and is recommended by lead literacy experts, including authors of the Common Core. And the materials have been updated and aligned with the Common Core in 2012, so you are in complete alignment with your current standards. Let's pause for a moment and look at what the domains are in core knowledge. A domain is an area of knowledge consisting of topically similar content and related vocabulary. You'll stay on a single topic for 2 to 3 weeks, so students really get a chance to be immersed in the knowledge and vocabulary that surrounds this topic. The domains include a variety of reading materials, read alouds for younger grades, and for older grades starting in grade 2, some independent reading combined with read aloud. They build upon the language and concepts presented in prior domains. This means that the domains are linked. They are not separate topics. And you'll see both across grades, K1 and 2, as well as within grades. The knowledge in the domains builds on prior knowledge, that students continue to cement the knowledge and vocabulary that they learned previously and build upon it with new information. The text also increase in complexity within the units. A key point about the domains is that they are listed in their recommended order. Because they build on content knowledge both within grade levels and across grade levels, we do recommend that you teach the domains in sequence. So let's take a look at the domains. Here's the domain sequence across grades K1 and 2. Please press pause and see if you can make some connections either within the grade or across the grade of the knowledge and vocabulary students are building. As I'm sure you're seeing, the domains do connect in a multitude of ways. Right? You can make connections within the grades between plants and farms, Native Americans to Columbus and the Pilgrims, and then across grades from Native Americans to early American civilizations, 5 senses of the human body, and even more. The listening and learning materials are going to need to be accessed at this point, so please make sure that you have your handouts ready. You'll see that materials are color-coded, K1 and 2 in these 3 colors. Let's take a look at the most essential pieces of the listening and learning material set. The first is the Read Aloud Domain Anthology. This is your main piece of information. It contains the read alouds, lesson plans, and materials that you'll need to instruct in each domain. The flip books are large books with pictures that accompany the read alouds that you'll do. Core Knowledge also provides image cards that can be placed around the room, placed at centers, and give children another opportunity to engage visually in the material that they are learning about. Finally, the supplemental guide has extra resources, differentiation activities, extra materials, and those can all be accessed online. We'd like you to pause at this point and just open the materials for your grades that are contained in that handout folder. Dig through it, take a look, see what you're going to be working with this year. Once you're ready to move on, just press play. Thank you. So now I'm sure you have lots of questions. We're going to dig into some of the materials contained in the anthology specifically in order to highlight some of the important aspects of each resource. First, the alignment chart. The alignment chart includes core content objectives for the entire domain. It includes learning goals that are aligned to the Common Core State standards and help you identify what's going to be very important within each domain. This is your first resource for where you want to go look in terms of learning what objectives are going to be covered, when are they going to be covered, what are students going to be experiencing through this domain. So please press pause at this point and explore the sample from grade 1, domain 2, the human body. While some of you will be teaching kindergarten and others grade 2, we'd like everyone to dig into the same sample so that you can share questions about the content of these materials when you come together for your in-person session. Please jot notes down in your notebook, becoming familiar with this resource, and capture any key takeaways. You will input these down to the discussion board at the end of this session. Please press pause and play when you're ready to move on. The domain background knowledge included with every domain actually provides a description of the knowledge and vocabulary students are going to learn. This can be a means of building your own background knowledge or reminding yourself of some of the materials covered in the domain. The background knowledge highlights big ideas around all the content objectives. So you can see the big things that you'll be teaching throughout the domain. It also helps make connections to knowledge already developed. The core knowledge sequence, as we just learned, does connect across the domains. And within the domain background knowledge section, core knowledge calls out specifically knowledge that should have already been built in order to access this domain. At this point, please press pause and explore the sample labeled Domain 2, the human body, but also labeled slide 35 in your folder. Please again jot notes, become familiar with this resource, and capture any takeaways or questions. Press play when you're ready to move on. Let's take a look now at the core vocabulary section. This section includes words explicitly highlighted in the read aloud. These are the words that students need to be building as they progress through the domain. They are words that they will encounter many times throughout the domain. And there are words that you're going to want to make sure students are picking up as you do your teaching. The core vocabulary section supports drawing connections between the words and understanding the nuances of the words, and also reinforces the building of these words into extensions and conversations. Students need to be using these words orally as they speak to you, the teacher, as well as to each other. They also need to be using them and understanding them within the read alouds and activities. So please press pause at this point and explore the sample, again, from the human body. Jot notes, get familiar, capture any key takeaways and questions, and really think about the importance of how this core vocabulary section will play out within the domain. Press play when you're ready to move on. Thank you. Now let's look at the day-by-day pacing calendar. This is your logistical resource. This indicates the number of instructional days you'll spend on each domain. It will indicate any lessons that require extra preparation. Now, of course, you'll prepare for each lesson by reading the texts and lessons and preparing any materials. But sometimes there will be other extra materials to gather for an activity that students may do. And this day-by-day pacing calendar will let you know when those days are coming up. The calendar also points out lessons that include student performance task assessments, the places where you'll pause to make sure that students are learning what they need to learn within the domain. At this point, please press pause and explore the sample from the human body. Again, you're jotting notes, getting familiar with this important resource, and capturing any questions and takeaways. Please press play when you're ready to move on. Finally, a resource that sometimes can be overlooked, but is very important, are these parent take-home letters. These take-home letters introduce the family to upcoming content and vocabulary. They're a way to involve parents in the process of helping students engage in this topic, this content, and vocabulary. It also provides trade book lists that students can read at the library or parents can read with their students, resources and websites, and other ideas of learning about these domains at home. Please press pause and explore the sample. Again, jot notes, capture takeaways, and become familiar with this resource. We do strongly encourage you to use this resource throughout the year, involving parents and families in addressing this achievement gap and helping students build the knowledge and vocabulary they need. Please press play when you're ready to move on. Now let's take a look at the domain assessment. It's important to remember that this is just a sample. Every domain comes with assessments so that teachers can understand what students are learning and what they may still need a little work on. The domain assessments assess core content, domain vocabulary, academic vocabulary that you're building across domains. You also are provided with a TENS chart, which helps you record and collect data, and a conversion chart to convert that raw score into a TENS score. This information is vitally important to track student success over time. So students must engage in these domain assessments. Please at this time press pause and explore the sample, jotting down notes, becoming familiar with the resource, and capturing any key takeaways. Think about how you may use these assessments to track individual student progress over time. Press play when you're ready to move on. Thank you so much for engaging so deeply in all of these key materials that you'll use in the listening and learning strand. Please be ready to submit some responses on the discussion board at this time. You've had a chance to explore these materials and resources and think about how you're going to begin to implement the core knowledge curriculum. We'd like you now to share key takeaways you jotted down as you explored each resource, thinking about the following questions. Which of these resources is going to be most useful for initial planning? Which will you need to ensure students are making progress throughout the year? And what questions do you currently have for your leaders on how these materials can be effectively used? I look forward to seeing you for part 4 when we take a closer look at day-to-day listening and learning lessons. Thank you.